Good.
Okay, welcome and good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. You are most welcome to tonight's edition of the Irish 30. The Irish 30 is a series of mental health and wellbeing webinars hosted by the Irish Support Agency. We have covered various topics on all aspects of keeping yourself well, and these webinars have been particularly pertinent during the year that we have had. So all of the past episodes can be found in our resource library on YouTube, so make sure to have a look at those. Just before I get started, I would like to acknowledge the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also to the lands on which you all are present tonight. So, look, thank you. We have Dympna Kennedy and Miriam Meaney joining us tonight for this wonderful session. Dympna Kennedy is the founder of CreatingBalance, a parent education and early childhood advisory organisation. So as you can imagine, she has vast experience to talk to us tonight. She has also written 2 books, Remote Working and Women Leading. She has 2 sons and she lives in Sydney with her husband. Miriam is a Cork native from County Cork, and she has lived in Australia for some time. She is currently the principal of a primary school in Katoomba in the Blue Mountains. So as you can imagine, also very experienced to talk to us tonight on this topic. This came about through over the past couple of months. I suppose we've identified that parents and children have had a difficult time of it, within and out of lockdowns, restrictions. So we just wanted to create a resource for parents that they could really go away with some key learnings and key tips that they'll be able to use throughout the school year. And we're delighted to host this. So I will, without further ado, hand it across to the lovely Dympna, and I hope you all enjoy.
Thank you, Anna, and welcome everyone. So we're going to look at your roadmap back to school. So who is this for? This is for your child if they are returning back to school in term 4 after a long absence, or it could also be for your child who you're planning on starting school in the new year. What are the things that we can do to facilitate that journey back to school after an absence, or the journey to school for the first time? And we're looking at it, if we think of a sat nav, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just go from home to school, one straight line, without any hiccups, any detours? That would be wonderful. But as we know, we don't live in an ideal world, and the last 18 months was far from ideal for a lot of families. So that straight line hasn't happened. But we're hoping, with everyone here tonight, that we'll be able to help make that line as straight as possible, at least avoid the pitfalls and the detours, or not go off track too far. I want you to have a look at this little image here at the moment. And if you have a pen, a piece of paper, I'd encourage you just to make a note. Right now, thinking about your child having returned to school after a term and a half of being absent, or your child starting school in February, where do you believe you are right now? Do you feel you're at the very bottom step, that you just, don't know what to do, or maybe it's your child, they just feel they can't do it, or you want to do it, but you're not sure how, or maybe you're giving it a go, and there might be someone just there on that top step. But make a note of where you think you are on that step. Because what we're going to go through tonight is a series of small steps that, regardless of where you are on those steps, we will guide you in being able to get to the very top and know that you did it and your child did it. So just make a note of where you are right now before we begin. So like the satellite navigation system, they're a wonderful invention, but as technology advanced as a sat nav is, sometimes there is no substitute for local knowledge, because your sat nav can take you on the main routes and highways rather than a quicker, better way of going. And I want you to look at this presentation tonight, similar for your child, that although this is your roadmap to school that's been presented here tonight, there is no substitution for your local knowledge of your own child's capabilities and abilities. So I speak for myself here, even though I do a lot of work with children in that 0 to 5 age group and know quite a bit about that age group. You remain the expert of your child. You know exactly where they are. So how are we going to plan this journey to the classroom for your child? So if we're here, you want to get to the classroom, we've done it in 4 steps. The first step is partnership, planning, prepare, and participate. And how we're going to roll this out tonight for you, we're going to start with Miriam, and Miriam's going to talk about that really vital, important role of partnerships between home, between you, the parent, and the teachers and the school. I will then share with you some insights and ideas around planning and making it easier, what you can do at home to make it easier for your child, how to prepare them, what are the things that are important in the skills for them to have in going back to school or starting school. And then we go back across to Miriam, who will then show what happens when they're actually in that classroom. And again, that participation, what's those goals for the teachers, what they have in working with you to ultimately help your child succeed. So I'm now going to hand you across to Miriam to go through partnerships.
Well, good evening, everybody, and what a great opportunity and what a great topic, Una, that we're talking about tonight. So look, what I'm really interested in doing is hearing from you how that return to school has gone, because obviously the children are back in school now. We had the kindergarten to year 2 children return last week, and then of course the rest of the children came back this week. So what I thought I would do is just give you a sense of how it's panned out at school, and give you that feeling of what it's like from the school's point of view, what we've observed. But then if we get the opportunity, I'd really love to hear from you about what your experiences have been. So I suppose the first thing to say is that we're in unprecedented times. Nothing like this has ever happened before. And I think the most important thing for your child is to know that they have somebody at school and at home who cares about them and is going to help them to navigate this space. So I suppose in terms of partnership, that's what we mean. We mean that the school and the parents are going to partner here in order to support the child. And some schools, you know, they present that partnership differently. So some schools are going to be much more inclined to reach out to parents. Other schools might not reach out so much, but I want you to know that every school really cares. The most important thing in any school is your child. So if you're feeling like, oh, I'm a bit shy about reaching out and letting them know that this is a bit of a struggle, all I can say to you is don't try and get over that little hump for the sake of your child, and just make that brave move and make a phone call to the school or to the teacher or send an email or whatever it is. Now, I'm hoping that the school is there to support you, but even like in an active way. But if you're not seeing that, please reach out and ask the school about how things are going for your child if you've got concerns. So let me now go through with you some of the things I've observed. So first of all, from the children's point of view, they came back full of enthusiasm and joy. They were so excited to see their friends. But over the course of the past few days, we've noticed, like we're only into Thursday now, some of them have struggled to reestablish the relationship that they already had with some of their peers. So friendships that were solid before, let's be honest, the children haven't seen each other for 16 weeks. So those friendships need to be, in some cases, recalibrated. I wouldn't say rebuilt, but definitely recalibrated. What happened in our school, for example, was we had some children come to school and most children stayed at home. Those children who came to school bonded with each other. Some of them who never had a profile in school, all of a sudden, they displayed confidence, they had a profile, they were popular. And now that everybody is back again, they're beginning to feel they're not quite as confident in their relationships with their peers. And one thing that I find that bothers children more than anything else, no matter how old they are, is that peer relationship. So like the teachers are definitely out there to care for your children. There's no doubt about that. But if they're feeling a little bit shaky about friendships that were so solid before and that have now got a little bit, I guess they're not sure about anymore, that can cause them anxiety. So that would be one thing that I feel that I've noticed, and I'd be really keen to get some input from you to hear if that's been your experience as well. Now, from the parents' point of view, there's been a couple of things. First of all, the parents have been very concerned about the children's learning, where they feel guilty about the fact that they weren't able to engage their children as much as they would have liked. So now they're thinking, oh my goodness, there's all these great parents here. I'm just one big fail. I just haven't managed this. That is not the case. We have got in fact, we're assuming that every child is where they were 16 weeks ago. That's what our assumption is. If children are beyond that point, we work with them there. If children are sort of halfway along, we work with them there. So no school has any expectation around the amount of learning that the children did at home. Because to be honest, in some cases, parents probably did a lot of the work and supported the children in such a way that it's not necessarily an indicator of where the children are at now in their learning. So I just suggest to parents to dispel that anxiety. The second thing I think that parents are worried about is technology, something that has come to my attention. I have spent about 2 days last week and 1 day this week unraveling issues that played out in our playground that actually started with technology. So it could have been that children were using devices more while they were at home than they normally would. Obviously, they were for their learning, but they may have been using devices more. Things happen online, and guess what? They play out on the playground in school. So then we might see. Last week, I'll give you an example. Last week we had 2 children fight in the playground. Now, actually, physical fight. We never see that. When we unraveled the layers around that story, we discovered that there had been some online activity that actually caused that to happen. So I think, just tightening up all of the structures that you have in place around supervising your children, if they're that little bit older. The younger ones, it's not the same issue. But if they're that little bit older, I just suggest that you're really keeping an eye on their use of technology. you're making sure that they get to bed on time, you're making sure that they're eating well. All of those things are really going to play into them being very happy at school. So I think they were the I suppose the only other thing I'd say is that I feel like the younger ones have adjusted more quickly. And I think that's because the little ones are inclined to play with anybody. You know, it's all about their friends. Their teachers love them. Their teachers are so excited to see them back. But it's about the friendships. And I think the little ones just get on with it. If somebody is around, they play with them. Whereas the older children, it's much more about who their friends are. And it becomes a real stress point if those friends don't seem to be around them or caring about them or interested in them as in the same ways as they were before lockdown. So really, I hope I know I didn't really talk to the slides, but I just wanted to give you a sense of my experience since our school has opened up again, and like I'd be really interested to hear yours as well.
That's great, Miriam. Thank you. I think a lot of parents will sort of breathe a sigh of relief at hearing in regards to the expectations of the school, because over the past couple of months, we have come into contact with parents who were really feeling that pressure. And it's understandable that they were, because as you say, we've never been through something like this. So, you know, they couldn't determine what would be expected and what wouldn't be expected. For anyone out there, and I think a lot of those parents who were feeling like that maybe didn't have that strong relationship that you were speaking about with their school, where they felt like they could make those sort of, you know, phone calls or emails. For anyone out there who feels that there's a bit of a barrier there between school and parents, and to sort of re-energize that partnership, what would you advise there, just to sort of get that partnership really healthy and established?
Well, look, I think first of all, if your school, like I'd be worried about a school that wouldn't be at this point in time reaching out. So, you know, I think the first thing I would say is, like, if you're struggling with the relationship with your school, there's a lot of questions to be asked around that. So, and the second thing I'd say is give it a go. Like, be brave. This is your child, your opportunity. We are here to do the best thing by our own children. And sometimes we just have to put ourselves in a little bit of discomfort, and we'll actually open up great possibilities for ourselves and our child, and that partnership between ourselves and our school.
Lovely. Thank you, Miriam. So I think we'll hand back now to Dympna.
So, thank you. The next part is about planning. And again, as Miriam has mentioned, when we focus on this term, it's about many of the children did return this week to school. These are just a few little basics that can make things then easier for those, but also for the parents out here tonight that are looking at February for having children go back in or start school in February, is again mirroring those school schedules. And that will be important too for the children this term, because I have heard of a primary that they went back for 2 days and now they've been closed down again. So should there be hiccups, and you know, between now and the end of term, keep mirroring the school schedules, you know, having breakfast, getting into the school uniform, getting our books ready, having the breaks at the same time around when they have them at school, and then having an opportunity for them to catch up with friends, because as Miriam said, a big component for young children is their friendship groups, and being able to mix and catch up with them, perhaps outside of school now that they can do that. So again, good. I'm not sure whether, Una, you may have received some questions in about any concerns parents had around that planning and what they can do around schedules and rituals. It's not about being too strict. It's about having flexibility, but having a certain routine in place helps the anxious children feel safe and secure, because it becomes predictable about what they're going to do. Now, if your child was one of those that Miriam mentioned, where the whole scene has changed, that they were the popular and there was a small cohort of children, and now there's a big group and they mightn't feel so comfortable in that group, is what you can do at home to help them do that, by connecting with them, by engaging with them, by hearing what those things that are bothering them, that we can alleviate a lot of that anxiety. Did you have any questions?
Yes, I did
Una?
indeed, Dempana. We did receive a question, and I think this applies to all kids of all ages. What sort of top tips would you give a parent who really struggles with getting their child ready and out the door in the morning?
Oh, that's a brilliant one, isn't it? Especially now if parents are going back to the office themselves, and you have to be out at 8 o'clock, and 8 o'clock we're still looking for the other school shoe. What do we do? My biggest tip for parents is it is much easier to change the environment than change our children. So we can do that by our planning the night before, preparing what's needed. So you're not finding out at 5 minutes before you leave that there was a project was meant to be done, or it was a special dress up day, so that you know in advance what is happening the next day. If it means, and this mightn't be good news for the parents, but if it means that we have to get up and start our day 15 minutes earlier, that will pay dividends if it means you're getting out the door. For parents who have younger children, that might be the issue, that they need to leave too, to drop, the older one to primary school, is again engaging with them. And it only takes a few minutes to get them to step into their world and then lead them into your world. So for example, if a younger child is playing with Thomas the Tank Engine, and the last thing they want to do is leave the railway track and get in the car and go to school, is getting down on the floor, engaging with them. And that might just be asking, where's Thomas today, and how was James, did he sleep well last night, and what about those cranky engines? And then suggest which train would they like to come in the car, and we're going to school, so that they can see who all's there, and we might even drive past the train station on the way back again. So engaging in their world, and then they're emotionally in a better place to come along in our world. But planning the night before is a big one.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Thank you. So that leads us on to school readiness. What does that look like? And often when we think of school readiness, we think of, and Miriam will be able to elaborate perhaps on this after, is, can they count? How well can they read? Do they know their colours? Can they write their name? There's so much pressure. And when we compete and compare with others, so really, what is it? And there's the social aspect. Are they socially ready? Emotionally? And then the academic. And you can see that one, I have third there. Because if the first two aren't in place, the third's going to be much more difficult. So on a social level, what we're looking at is cooperative play with others, being independent, being able to take care of themselves, even for the basics of being able to open that lunchbox. Confident in asking questions, so that your child feels confident in being able to say, I don't understand that. Can you show me again? or wanting to permission to leave the class if they need to use the bathroom. So being confident in speaking up if they need clarification. Their ability to self-regulate, their ability to be able to listen, follow directions, and having a level of empathy and caring about other people as well. So those social and emotional things are so, so important for those little ones starting next year in February. Then that development of concepts, problem solving and creativity, and the ability to focus. How do we do a lot of these? I won't go into it really deeply tonight, but it's simple things of in the everyday of what you do with your child, even from a very, very young age, saying, would you like to wear the red socks or the yellow socks? We're introducing color. We're counting the steps as we climb the steps. We're introducing numbers. We can engage in play, and free and open-ended play for children is when they do become creative and they learn to problem solve. And the one thing that will really help all of this, and for children who have returned into this term, that maybe there's a parent out there that feels, you know what, that's still an issue, being able to focus or listen, is they will learn that by us. So by showing that we listen to them, engage with them, rather than at the end of the day saying, how was your day, Una? I'm most likely going to get good. But if we reframe it and I say, Una, what was one really good thing that happened at school today? And what was one thing that happened today, Una, that you think, I wish it could have been better, it wasn't good. What was that one thing? And then you can elaborate on that and say, how could you have made it different? What could have happened that it could have been different? We're engaging them in that problem solving. So although we tend to focus, and early childhood often focuses on that academic, the social and emotional skills are so, so important. Because if they're confident and happy and have a nice circle of friends, they're going to be emotionally in a better place to be able to learn, put their hand up, talk to their teacher, and go home again in the evening and tell you about their day. What can we do to prepare? Just leading into that, empowering our child, actively engaging with them, being aware of your child's emotional needs, and then applying what I use with families with young children is what I call the seeing methodology, and I'll explain about that just in a moment. But it's how do we empower our child if we have a child that perhaps is anxious and seems reluctant in going back to school? Maybe they went back this week and they had a really good week, but don't really want to go back next week. Or maybe this week wasn't so good and that just confirmed, I don't know if I want to go back. I actually like being at home. How can we help them? And the best way to help them is for us to be their calming presence. Because for an anxious child, if we get anxious and worry about their anxiety, they're not going to calm. Their anxiety will rise as well. It's being able to show your child as well that they are actually brave. Inside them, they are brave, because that feeling of anxious is really natural for the body to say, there's something coming up that I don't feel quite prepared for, that I didn't do, that I don't know what's going to happen. But the fact that they went to school this week, and you can anchor back on that and say, remember on Monday when you weren't so sure what, Thomas be there, or was, you know, Michael there? And you were anxious going in the gate, and then you did it. That's bravery. So you have bravery within you. Not dismissing the concerns that they have, because the smaller they are, their concerns and their worries are in proportion. So if we can listen to them and say, so that I can see that worried you. How do you think it could have been different? What do you think we could do? Engaging them in the problem solving helps build their confidence, rather than a parent feeling we need to fix our child, we need to fix their anxiety, we need to sort out the problems for them. And remember, it's not about being perfect or seeking perfection from either you or your child, but it's about looking at realistic expectations of them, knowing that we can't jumpstart their anxiety, they can't snap out of it, but we can be there. And remember those steps at the beginning, just little steps at a time. But I think the most important thing is engaging with them, listening to them, and encouraging them. And this brings me to the SANE methodology that I use, which the S. What's the situation? What is it that they, and you will get that answer by asking that question of, what's something that happened today that didn't really go the way you wanted it to go, or it wasn't a nice part of the day, or you wish it hadn't have happened. So what was that situation? Maybe I'll use Miriam's example of that your child has been there the entire time, and now there's other children coming back, and your little group has been splintered because they've run off and seen their other best friend that they haven't seen for a long time, and they may be feeling a little bit lost. Acknowledge those feelings. That's the A. That would be hard. That was difficult for you. That sounds frightening. Acknowledge that. And then the N is to navigate. Engage them in it and say, what could we do? What do you think? What if? Should we? Could we? So we do engage in them in that discussion. And when they come up with and they'll come up with ideas that we can say, actually, that's a really good idea. Let's give that a go. That's a good idea if you went and seen. So encourage that. And then envisage as well. That's what the E is, envisage. What's the long term? What's the learning out of this? That you're helping them reflect on something, be part of the solution and problem solving it. And the long term is that you have demonstrated to your child that you are a safe person to come and share my worries with. I can always come to you. And if we plant those seeds when they're little, you're going to have a teenager that's instantly going to turn to you, because deep in their memory is that you've always been there, that you've sat, you've listened, you haven't tried to fix, you haven't dismissed them, you haven't lectured them. That's your long term. So that's the saying. What's the situation? Acknowledge the feelings, navigate with them through it, and then what do you envisage long term? What's the long term learning from it?
Dympna, just in regards to the awareness of your child's emotional needs, we did have a question that I think would probably apply here. How would you manage if you have two quite different little personalities that you're trying to manage as a parent?
Beautiful. Love it. Let me, I'm going to jump actually to this next slide here. Sir Ken Robinson was a big believer in that early education and what we can do to help all children flourish. So that's why I've used the garden. And what he said was The gardener does not make a plant grow. The job of a gardener is to create optimal conditions. So our job as parents or as educators is not to make a particular type of child, not to have them molded and have that younger brother be like his big sister who was a breeze at school and listened and done all the right things. To see what each child brings, their own unique qualities and skills. So even if you think, well, my boy is so stubborn and he won't listen and he won't follow directions, I want you to look and say, how can we nurture and make that's a lovely quality, because you want your child to be a little bit stubborn and dig their heels in when they're in their teens and their peers are doing something that they don't want to be engaged in. You want that child to be able to say, no, I'm not doing it. So it's treat each child differently depending on how their nature. You are, as the parent, will be able to tap into what makes each of your children unique. And like the garden, you will get little surprises. Doesn't matter how much you plan and work things out, you'll get a blueberry pop up among the daffodils. That doesn't take away from the garden, but yeah, not to compare. Don't compare them with other siblings, and certainly don't compare them with other children in their classroom. And just to finish on this, one example that many parents overlook is kindergarten. In kindergarten, there can be over 15, up to a 15-month age gap between the youngest child in the class and the oldest child. So if you had a boy who was 4 starting school in February, he could be sitting beside a girl who's going to turn 6 in April, for example. So we can have, and we forget that when we look at reading levels. And I say, oh, Una, what reading level are you at? And you might be at reading level 8. And I'm thinking, he's way behind because he's struggling at 3. Miriam will touch on this more, but that's why it's so important. 2 different children, don't compare them. Look for their unique characteristics.
That's great. Thank you.
And over to Miriam.
Okay, so look, I'm going to talk a little bit more about participation, because I think participation looks really different for everybody now. So clearly, many of you were very involved with your children's learning over the past 16 weeks, or I think some of those were holiday weeks, but 12 weeks of term. And, you know, you might find now relinquishing the relationship you established with your child as somebody who guided the learning that was provided by the school, you know, that there's a certain you're feeling a certain loss around that. And also the fact that all of a sudden the structure of working with your child on a day-to-day basis is gone and they're no longer there. So I think it's really very normal for you to feel like that opportunity to participate in your child's learning has really diminished. The other thing I'd say is that for some parents, life has now suddenly kicked back in, and they're missing just that whole ease of you know, getting up when it worked, doing a certain amount of learning, taking a bit of a break, not having to do these runs to and from school. I had a parent say to me this afternoon, gee, this is hard. I'd forgotten how hard it was. So, you know, there's that happening as well. And I think the other thing that I'm very conscious of in our school is that, you know, this roadmap, it's fantastic that we are keeping everybody medically safe, but it's all about what you cannot do. And it's all about the fact that parents, you know, they can't come on site, gates are closed. Like, it's exactly the opposite to the way a school should work. So, and I think that's really everybody's feeling the tragedy of that. The teachers, it's not the way the teachers are used to being around parents. And it's not the way children are used to experiencing school, where their parents often bring them in, have a chat with the teacher, or have a chat with the teacher on duty in the playground, and then let the day unfold. So I suppose what I would say is that you can still, even if you're feeling like the school is a little bit closed off to you for now, you still can participate in your child's learning. So, you know, at the end of every day, there are great questions you can ask your child about the day they've had. You know, I'm sure you've all done this. Marion, you'd even remember this from when your kiddies were little. And you ask them, well, how was your day? Good. End of story. So it's about finding the right question to ask them. So maybe something like, well, who did you play with today? And of course, that's a great question, because guess what? It's going to tell you about how they're going socially as well. Or what new thing? Did you learn something new today? Like, was there something you learned that you didn't know before? Again, that gives you insights into how they're learning. And they're probably going to respond to that a little bit more than they might, you know, how come you didn't tell, you know, what book did you read or whatever? I think that's a nicer way of going about it. What made you laugh today? Was there something that was funny? Did somebody do something funny? Every child laughs over the course of a day. So that kind of gets them going as well. They'll tell you a story. And then like, what is there something happening tomorrow that you're looking forward to? I know in our school tomorrow, for example, it's Friday's assembly day and tomorrow is teacher appreciation day. And something like that might come up, and then the parent can engage in a conversation around that with the child. And I think, you know, like there's always something to look forward to with all those little people who come to school. There's always, like for me, what I look forward to in the day, no matter how hard the day is, I think, right, well, when I get to 11, I'll have that coffee, you know, and that keeps me going. Well, the children are just like that. There are moments of joy in their day, and it's a question of finding those moments of joy. So you can help them to find those by having those conversations with them outside of school hours, even though you can't participate in their learning anymore. So look, Dympna, you said a lot of things that really resonated with me. First of all, I was going to say to parents that, like, if your child continues to struggle, like, let's give it a few weeks. But if you continue to feel anxious about your child's learning or about your child's participation with their peers, we have options available. Like, it may be that your child needs to gradually be reintroduced rather than full days. It might work for your child for you to think about your child maybe not being in school for a full day, maybe picking the child up a little bit early, and that might be something to look forward to. Sometimes the playground in the morning is a major challenge for children. Maybe you can negotiate with the school just to have a little bit of a later start. Like, they're all really, in my world, very pragmatic things that we can easily do, that no principal, I would say, would object to. Sometimes it's not offered, because if I offer something like that, half of my school might decide to take it up. But if you know that it's something that a school would work with you on, I think it's a great thing to put on the table. I loved what Dympna said about jumping to the rescue. I think be prepared for your child to have difficulties, and there's nothing like living with discomfort. We learn from our mistakes, and life is all about imperfection. So I just encourage you to encourage your children to feel safe about making mistakes and to feel safe about talking about them. Now, the other thing I've noticed since I've gone back is we all love our little children. Absolutely. You love your child. That is the biggest treasure on earth. And you give that treasure to us to look after over the course of a day. But sometimes things happen for your little person in school, and they go home with their version of the story. And it may be that the school version is very different. So what I'd suggest is, rather than jumping to their rescue and sort of getting very defensive about what's happened, like just think about the fact that maybe there were some adults involved, there were some other children involved. And if you feel that you need to talk to the school about what happened, just take that very reasonable approach of hearing every voice and then deciding what, you know, making a decision around what happened and having a talk to your child about that. Just something very practical, very quickly. I thought I'd mention reports, because if your child is in school at this point in time, you're going to get a school report this semester, and you're probably wondering, what's that going to look like? My child was at home with me for 12 weeks. How can the school report on my child? I just bear in mind that teachers are pretty quick at sort of getting to know your child. It's all about developing a relationship with your child. So your teacher will have a good knowledge of your child because they knew your child for 2 terms. And then we are now back, and even though it's, you know, a mad scramble to the end of the year, teachers having known your child already, there's lots happening in schools to find out where children are at in their learning. So the report will look very different this time round to what you would normally see. The report cannot report on learning at home because we can't be certain that children worked independently on something that that parents were involved in as well. So you might feel like this report isn't quite where you'd like it to be at, but I just think that you need to it's a sign of the times, really. It's the only way the schools can operate at the moment. So I encourage you to approach your school, to participate in a conversation with your school's teacher if anything comes up in that report that you are surprised by. But I do want to emphasize the fact that the reports this time around are going to be far less around grades and much more around the sort of behaviors, the positive behaviors that your child is able to demonstrate when the going gets tough. And was there anything else I wanted to say? Yeah, and I just think like there are lots of, Dympna will be much more expert than I am in this area, but like if you really believe that your child continues to struggle and the time has been given, you've worked with the school and there are still concerns there, I just encourage you to, again, be brave, be courageous, talk to your GP, talk to those external services that are out there and see if there's any support that you are, any insights, any support that you can get that would help you prepare for the 2022 school year. That's really.
Thank you so much, Miriam. That's wonderful. And I suppose leading on from that, I do have a question that is quite apt. So if anyone else would like to ask a question, you're very welcome to pop your mic on and ask it, or you can pop it into the chat. We have a few in there already. But just on that, Miriam, how do I know when the time is right to seek additional learning support for my child?
Well, look, I think your child will often have many ways of letting you know. Like one of the classics, Una, is that children might not want to come to school if they're struggling with their learning. So now reluctance to come to school, and again, you'd be much better than I am here, can come from a variety of places. But certainly a child who is finding everything is too hard for them in the classroom, then I think that's something to take up with the teacher. I suppose, you know, those things we talked about earlier in the piece tonight around just watching their sleep patterns, ensuring they're getting exercise and fresh air. And like, if you feel that you've got everything in place and you're just noticing that your child is having difficulty sort of, maybe perhaps it's focusing even at home. Like I think a lot of these behaviors can present at home. So, you know, if you notice that your child finds it hard to pay attention for sort of anything over and above what we consider normal. So the way you know, that's very easy for me to say what we consider normal, but my rule of thumb is, well, a 5-year-old should be able to concentrate for about 5 minutes. And so on and so forth, a 12-year-old about 12 minutes. So like if you're finding that your child can't concentrate when it's about doing something that you need them to concentrate on, that's something definitely worth looking into. And the other thing I think is, if you were to notice that your child just isn't quite, like if there's any problem with how the child is speaking, if they're having difficulty following instructions, if they're having difficulty articulating exactly what it is they want, getting in early is such a wonderful thing, because these are all barriers to learning when they get to school. And if you have something in place to support your child, those barriers are knocked aside and your child can get on with his or her learning.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Another question in the chat that came through is NAPLAN likely to go ahead for the older age groups? What will inform that decision making?
Okay, so NAPLAN went ahead this year.
Okay.
And it so happened that NAPLAN happened like when we weren't in lockdown. And I'm not sure where NAPLAN is heading, to be honest, Una.
Okay.
I know that there's a lot in the media about how NAPLAN is not a good measure of the sort of learning we want our children to experience in school. And unfortunately, if a test is put there, for children to do, there's this temptation, not in all schools, but in some schools, to teach to that test, which again is limiting, because the NAPLAN results are quite public, and some schools probably feel that good results are important. So NAPLAN is meant to test what a child has learned up until year 3 or year 5. It's meant to test, without having to go to any great lengths, what a school is teaching a child over the course of their learning up until year 3. It's not meant to be kind of one of those, it's not like the HSC where you have to do this massive amount of work and study. It's really, it sits there as that kind of a test. And look, any data that's used in isolation is not a good idea. But NAPLAN data, used alongside a lot of other data, can be very helpful in helping schools to support children's learning. And then clearly, if parents feel that something came up as a complete surprise in NAPLAN, well, that's something to take up with the school.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question here, but I don't know if either of you will be able to answer it, but it's in the main chat anyway. Is there a shortage of teachers in New South Wales?
Well, I suppose, Dympna, are you happy for me to take that one? Can't hear Dympna. I think she's on mute.
On mute. Absolutely. My only side comment on that is I think more schools could do with more male teachers in them. But I'll give that over to Miriam.
That's interesting.
Look, I think there's been so much complexity and so much accountability around teaching. Like, we are working with the greatest treasure on earth, people's children. And I think that the job, it's a very demanding job. Now, anybody who is a teacher who is there because their heart is in it, they love what they do, and they get great, I think they get great delight and pleasure and joy out of working with children and knowing that they are helping those children to be the best learners that they can be. But they're increasingly, the demands are just increasing, all the time. So, we started out, when I started back in Ireland all those years ago teaching, I was just responsible for the academic curriculum. If the child wasn't able to read at those levels, well, then I was in trouble. But if the child was fighting in the playground or having issues about coming to school, that was nothing to do. Whereas now I have this, huge role around everything to do with that little person.
Yeah.
Let's face it, that little person is spending a lot of hours every week in my school with my teachers. And look, we embrace that, but I think I can understand how some people would actually feel like they've signed up for something that they hadn't anticipated would be so intense for them.
Okay, ladies. Well, look, lovely discussion tonight, and I hope all of the children, it touches you when you hear the story, Miriam, about the little friends coming in and they have to try and find their friendship group again. And I really hope that all comes back for them, because it's a very important time for them to have their little buddies, and to develop those. But look, thank you so much. It has been a wonderful contribution to this vast topic, and it has been very informative. Dempana, I might hand it over to you just for your final sort of message to parents, maybe some sort of message of hope?
Look, I would finish off by saying, and I'm speaking from Sydney and saying this, in real estate, they talk about in real estate in Sydney, it's all about location, location, location. When it comes to our children, it's all about relationships, relationships, relationships. So my closing piece would be, have realistic expectations of yourself, realistic expectations of your child. Keep that communication open. Tap into, I go by that brain development. We have the amygdala in here and the frontal cortex. Speak to that child, that anxious, upset, frightened, angry child. They're speaking from here, from that emotional center of the brain. They need to borrow our frontal cortex to be that calming presence, to allow them to calm down, and then in that state to be able to step forward again, and not jump in and fix their problems. Engage with them in what they could do, how we could do it better, what's another way, and acknowledging those little steps. All of that will build their confidence. You will create problem solvers, innovative thinkers, creators, and that's what the world needs more of, those good leadership skills. And never give up.
Never give up, yeah.
There's different seasons, and I finished here with the garden. There's different seasons, and just like your children, they will all blossom in their own time if we create the right environment for them, a lovely, safe, nurturing space at home. If we are positive about school as well, if we speak highly of our school, speak highly of our teachers, and then your child will have just that good, strong relationship as well between home and school. So that would be my closing thing.
And I think actually that we were going to go back to the little diagram that you had at the start in terms of where people maybe are at now after your lovely presentation.
So again, remembering that sat-nav, that there is no substitution for local knowledge of your child's capabilities and abilities. And you have that as a parent, and then you can tap in to that extra layer of knowledge that your teacher, who spends so much time with them, what they have, having that other lovely perspective. And again, finishing with the step, where are you now after listening to, looking at the presentation, hearing from Miriam? Where do you think you are on that step? Do you think you've taken a step? And what I would say here is the very fact you've tuned in tonight, or you may be watching this at a later date, but the very fact you tuned in and watched this, I would say you are well up that ladder, because you're at a minimum of how do I do it. That's why you're here. So if you marked anywhere below that step, no, up the steps you go. You're definitely, by participating here tonight or watching later, you're at a minimum of how do I do it. I hope you've got picked up one or two good tips from tonight, and that you get on up there and you can do it. And with your help, your child will do it too.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you.